In the half-light of a Parisian autumn, where fog clings to cobblestones like forgotten secrets, two women stand at opposite ends of a gallery, one surrounded by admirers, the other shrouded in solitude. Théa Belmont, celebrated artist of the Belle Époque, paints portraits that reveal the soul. Dr. Camille Archambault, a pioneering physician, dissects bodies to understand life. When their worlds collide at a salon where art meets science, neither suspects that the collision will shatter everything they've built in the name of propriety. In 1890s Paris, where women's ambitions are tolerated only in whispers and love between women exists only in shadows, Théa and Camille must choose between the lives they've carefully constructed and a passion that could destroy them both. The salon hummed with masculine certainty, that particular vibration of self-assured voices discussing progress, empire, and the mysteries of the modern age. Théa stood before her latest work, a portrait of Madame Devereux that had caused considerable controversy for its unflinching honesty, and weathered the storm of questions with practiced grace. She had learned long ago to smile just enough, to deflect praise with charming modesty, to let men believe they were discovering her genius rather than confronting it. Across the chandelier-lit expanse, she noticed her. A woman in severe gray wool, standing apart from the glittering assembly like a monk who'd wandered into a masquerade. Dr. Camille Archambault. Théa had heard whispers about her, the physician who performed autopsies, who published papers under her own name, who had somehow carved a space in the Yeshua faculty despite scandalized opposition. She moved through the crowd with the precision of a scalpel, her dark eyes cataloging details others missed. Their gazes met across the room, and Théa felt something shift in her chest, a displacement of air and certainty. Camille's expression revealed nothing, but she didn't look away. The moment stretched, elastic and dangerous, until Professor Beaumont blocked Théa's view with his considerable bulk, launching into tedious praise of her brushwork. Later, as waiters circulated with champagne and the evening devolved into the usual performances of wit and erudition, Théa found herself navigating toward that severe gray figure. Camille stood examining a painting of anatomical studies, écorchés rendered in meticulous detail, with the focus of someone reading a beloved text. "You find beauty in this?" Théa asked, surprising herself with the directness. Camille turned, and up close, Théa could see the fine lines around her eyes, the silver threading through dark hair pulled into an austere knot, the intelligence that burned like fever in her gaze. "I find truth in it," Camille replied, her voice lower than expected, textured with something that made Thea's skin prickle. "Beauty is merely truth's most seductive costume. And you prefer truth naked, I suppose." The words escaped before Thea could catch them, carrying an undertone she hadn't intended, or perhaps had intended completely. A ghost of a smile touched Camille's lips. "In my profession, Mademoiselle Belmont, one learns that what lies beneath the surface is always more remarkable than the facade, no matter how exquisitely painted." The challenge hung between them, electric and unmistakable. Around them the salon continued its elaborate dance of propriety, but in this small pocket of space, something else was breathing, something with teeth and hunger. "Then perhaps," Thea said quietly, "you should let me paint you. I promise to reveal only what you're willing to show." Camille's dark eyes searched her face with clinical precision, as if diagnosing symptoms of a rare condition. "And what makes you think I'm willing to show you anything at all?" "The fact that you're still standing here." The silence that followed felt like free fall. Then Camille inclined her head, just barely. "Tuesday afternoon. My residence at 47 Rue de la Glacière, 4 o'clock." She walked away before Thea could respond, leaving behind only the faint scent of carbolic soap and something else. Something like rain on stone. Thea watched her disappear into the crowd, her heart performing acrobatics, her rational mind couldn't explain. She had painted hundreds of faces, studied countless souls through the alchemy of oil and canvas, but she had never felt this sensation of standing at a precipice, knowing the fall would change everything, unable to step back. The house on Rue de la Glacière surprised her. Thea had expected austerity, clinical coldness, the atmosphere of an asylum or laboratory. Instead, she found herself in a library that smelled of old leather and Turkish tobacco, where medical texts stood shoulder to shoulder with volumes of poetry, where a fire crackled against the October chill, and where Dr. Camille Archambault sat in an armchair with a medical journal, reading glasses perched on her nose, looking more human than Thea had dared imagine. "You came," Camille said, not quite a question. "Did you doubt I would?" "I doubted your sincerity. Artists often make promises in the heat of performance." Camille set aside her journal and removed her glasses, and without them, her face softened, revealed vulnerability she'd hidden at the salon. "But you've brought your tools, so perhaps I misjudged." Thea set down her case of charcoals and paper. She had brought only the essentials for preliminary sketches, unwilling to commit to oils until she understood what she was truly painting. "Where would you like to sit?" "You're the artist, you tell me." The answer should have been simple. Arrange the subject, adjust the light, begin the work. But standing in Camille's private sanctuary, breathing air thick with intimacy and risk, Thea found herself paralyzed by possibilities. She wanted to understand this woman, to trace the architecture of her thoughts, to discover what had forged such fierce independence. "Tell me why you became a physician," Thea said instead of answering. Camille's eyebrows rose. "I thought you came to paint, not to interrogate." "I paint by interrogating. Every portrait is a question the subject answers without speaking." Something flickered in Camille's expression. Approval, perhaps, or recognition. She moved to the window where afternoon light fell in geometric patterns across the Persian carpet. "My sister died when I was 17. Childbirth. The physician said it was God's will, that women's bodies were mysteries beyond mortal comprehension. He was incompetent and arrogant, and she bled to death while he prayed." Thea's hands had already begun sketching, capturing the rigid line of Camille's spine, the set of her shoulders against grief that time had crystallized but never dissolved. "I decided then that women's bodies would not remain mysteries, that I would cut through the superstition and sentiment to find the mechanisms beneath, that I would understand what the incompetent and arrogant refused to learn." Camille turned from the window, and the light caught her face in profile, illuminating the elegant bone structure, the determination carved into every feature. "And you? Why do you paint?" The question landed like a stone in still water, rippling through Thea's careful defenses. She drew in silence for several heartbeats, her charcoal whispering across paper, before answering. "Because painting is the only place I'm allowed to see clearly. In life, we're taught to look away, to soften our gaze, to pretend we don't notice the cracks in people's performances. On canvas, I can stare as long as I need to. I can tell the truth." "And do you? Tell the truth?" "Always. It's why half my subjects hate their portraits." Camille laughed, a sound like water over stones, unexpected and lovely. "Then I suspect I'll hate mine as well." "Perhaps. Or perhaps you'll recognize yourself for the first time." The afternoon dissolved into charcoal and conversation, into the strange intimacy of artist and subject. Thea sketched while Camille spoke about her work, about the resistance she faced, about the exhilaration of discovery, and Camille, in turn, asked questions that cut through Thea's usual deflections, questions about loneliness and ambition, about the cost of living unconventionally in a conventional world. As the light began to fail, Thea set down her charcoal and studied what she'd captured. Not one sketch, but dozens. Fragments of expression and gesture, pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. "May I see?" Camille asked. Thea hesitated. The sketches were too revealing, too honest about her fascination, but she'd promised truth, and truth demanded courage. She handed over the sheaf of papers. Camille studied them in silence, her face unreadable. When she finally looked up, her dark eyes held something Thea couldn't name. Recognition, perhaps, or fear, or possibility. "Same time next Tuesday?" Camille asked. "Yes," Thea whispered, knowing she was agreeing to much more than another sitting. By the fourth session, they had abandoned all pretense. Thea arrived with her paints, but they remained in their case while she and Camille sat by the fire, talking until the candles burned low and the world outside ceased to exist. They spoke of everything and nothing, of Camille's latest autopsy findings, of Thea's upcoming exhibition, of philosophy and politics, and the peculiar loneliness of being women who refused to diminish themselves. But beneath the conversation ran another dialogue, conducted in glances and accidental touches, in the way Camille's voice softened when she said Thea's name, in the way Thea found excuses to move closer, to study the shape of Camille's hands, the curve of her neck, the silver in her hair that caught lamplight like captured stars. It was Camille who finally named what was growing between them. They sat on opposite ends of a settee, close enough that Thea could feel the heat of Camille's body, far enough to maintain the fiction of propriety. Rain hammered against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound that made confession feel safer. "I need to tell you something," Camille said, her voice taut with precision, as if she were presenting findings to a medical board. "About why I've allowed these sessions to continue, though we've produced very little actual painting." Thea's heart contracted. "You want to end them?" "No. God help me, no." Camille turned to face her fully, and the naked want in her eyes stole Thea's breath. "I want to continue them. I want to see you every Tuesday and then every day. I want to hear your voice and your observations and your infuriating questions. I want things I have no right to want." The confession hung between them like a bridge across an abyss. Thea could feel her pulse in her throat, her fingertips, the base of her spine. She had known, of course, had felt the current between them from that first meeting, but hearing Camille speak it aloud transformed possibility into something solid and terrifying. "What if," Thea said carefully, "what if you do have the right? What if we both do?" Society would say otherwise. The law would say otherwise. God himself supposedly says otherwise. "I'm not asking society or the law or God. I'm asking you, Camille, what do you want?" Camille's control fractured. She reached across the space between them and took Thea's face in her hands, those precise surgeon's hands that had held countless hearts, and her touch was gentle as prayer. "I want to kiss you. I want to know if your mouth tastes like the rebellion I see in your eyes. I want to stop pretending that these sessions are about art when they've been about this since the beginning." "Then stop pretending," Thea whispered against Camille's palm. The kiss, when it came, felt like falling and flying simultaneously, like every risk Thea had ever taken distilled into one perfect moment of surrender. Camille kissed like she approached surgery, with focus and skill and devastating precision, but beneath the control was something wild, something that had been caged too long and was finally free. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Thea saw tears on Camille's face, silver tracks that caught the firelight. "I've never," Camille whispered. "I've spent my whole life in books and bodies, in science and solitude. I thought I'd locked this part of myself away forever. And then you walked toward me across that gallery, and I knew you were going to destroy every defense I'd built." Thea kissed the tears from Camille's cheeks, tasting salt and vulnerability and courage. "Then let me paint you," she said. Let me paint this. Let me show the world what I see when I look at you. A woman who's brilliant and brave and beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with convention. They'll know, Camille said. Anyone who looks at that portrait will know what you feel, what we are. Then they'll know the truth. Isn't that what you wanted? Truth instead of facade? Camille pulled her close again, and they sat tangled together by the fire while rain washed the city clean outside, both women understanding they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The portrait would be dangerous, their love would be dangerous, but some truths were worth any price. 3 months later, Thea's exhibition opened to a crowd that packed the gallery wall to wall. Her work had always drawn attention, but this collection, portraits of women in states of genuine emotion rather than posed prettiness, had generated unprecedented controversy. Critics called it radical, indecent, a vulgar intrusion into the private souls of her subjects. But it was the final portrait, hung in a small alcove at the back, that people whispered about. Théa had titled it simply, "The Physician." It showed Camille in her library, surrounded by books and instruments, but the way Théa had painted her transformed clinical setting into temple. Light fell across Camille's face with such tenderness that anyone who looked could see the artist's adoration. The expression Théa had captured, that moment of vulnerability when Camille had first confessed her desires, was so intimate, so raw, that viewing it felt like witnessing something sacred and forbidden. Théa stood across the room, watching people's reactions, feeling exposed and defiant in equal measure. She had painted exactly what she'd promised, the truth. And if that truth revealed her own heart as much as Camille's face, so be it. She felt Camille before she saw her, that now familiar tightening of awareness. Camille moved through the crowd in midnight blue silk, her usual austerity abandoned for this one evening. When their eyes met, Théa saw fear and pride warring in Camille's expression. Camille stopped before the portrait, and the crowd around her fell silent, sensing drama. She studied the painting for a long moment while Thea's heart hammered against her ribs. Then Camille turned and walked directly toward her, ignoring the whispers, the scandalized looks, the shocked faces of colleagues who had never seen Dr. Archambault display emotion. "It's extraordinary," Camille said when she reached Théa, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It's the truest thing I've ever seen." "You don't hate it?" "I hate that it makes me so transparent. I hate that everyone who looks at it will know what we are." Camille's voice dropped lower, meant only for Théa. "But I love that you saw me this clearly, that you painted me with such—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Such devotion." Around them, speculation ignited like fire catching dry wood. Professor Beaumont cleared his throat uncomfortably. Madame Devereux fanned herself with exaggerated shock. But Théa noticed others too. Women whose eyes held recognition rather than revulsion, who looked at the portrait and saw themselves reflected in its forbidden truth. "People will talk," Théa said. "Let them talk. I'm tired of silence." Camille took her hand, there in the middle of the gallery, in front of everyone who mattered in Parisian society. The gesture was small but unmistakable, a declaration more powerful than words. The room erupted in whispers, in gasps, in the sound of reputations shattering. Théa felt the weight of consequence settling over them both. The invitations that would stop coming, the opportunities that would evaporate, the price of choosing love over propriety. But she also felt Camille's hand in hers, warm and steady, a surgeon's hand that had cut through lies to find truth, an artist's hand that had painted what others refused to see. "Take me home," Camille said quietly. "Take me to your studio, and let's build something beautiful out of the ruins of our respectability." They walked out together through the whispering crowd, through the scandal and shock, into the Paris night where fog softened the edges of everything and possibility hung thick as smoke. Behind them, the portrait watched with Camille's painted eyes, a permanent record of the moment when silence finally gave way to desire, when two women chose truth over safety, love over fear. The newspapers would destroy them by morning. But tonight, they had each other, and that was enough. That was everything. In the end, Théa and Camille built their lives in the margins society had tried to erase them from. Théa continued painting, her work growing bolder and more unflinching, while Camille's medical practice shifted toward treating women other physicians refused to see. They created a home where truth wasn't forbidden and love didn't require silence, where two brilliant, defiant women proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is refuse to disappear. Their story is a reminder that love, particularly love that challenges convention, demands courage equal to its beauty. Between silence and desire lies a choice, and those brave enough to choose desire find themselves not destroyed by scandal, but liberated by truth. Want to read more stories that celebrate forbidden love, fierce women, and the courage to live authentically? Follow for more Sapphic romance that refuses to whisper when it should shout. Between silence and desire, where love speaks louder than fear,